Hi everybody, I'm going to show you how to make a batch of scones. This is going to be demonstrating the rubbing in method, which is the method that we use to combine the fat and the flour when we make things like scones, pastry or crumble toppings, things like that. So first of all, I'm going to show you in my bowl I have got some flour. So I've got 125 grams of self-raising flour and I've got 25 grams of wholemeal self-raising flour. If you haven't got wholemeal, then it doesn't matter, you could use just 150 grams of self-raising flour, but the wholemeal just adds some extra fibre to our scones. I've then got, you can see, 50 grams of butter, and the butter is very, very cold because it needs to be cold for this method. So you need to get your butter straight out of the fridge. So what I'm going to do first of all, if you can see, I'm going to use a table knife and I'm just going to cut very small pieces of butter with my table knife, and then I'm going to use, as I say, what's called the rubbing in method. And what I want to do is I want to coat all the flour with the fat, and to do that I'm going to rub the butter and the flour together using only my fingertips. So it will take a while, well, a few minutes. When I say a while, it will take a few minutes, and if I start off with this in very small pieces, then it will make it a little bit easier. Okay, so that's all cut up into small pieces, if you can see. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by rubbing. So using my fingertips, I'm getting hold of the flour and the butter, and I'm just rubbing it with my fingertips, rubbing it together. And what I want to end up like is, I want to end up with this looking like fine breadcrumbs. And then I will know that I've distributed the fat throughout the flour and coated the flour with the fat. So with scones, we can make them either sweet or we can make them savoury, which is obviously not sweet. So I've chosen today to make some fairly straightforward, simple ones, which are going to be sweet, and I'm going to add in some sultanas. You can add in whatever you want in terms of dried fruits, so you might want to use some glacé cherries or raisins or some dried apricots or whatever you've got in really, or whatever you fancy. Of course you can make them plain as well if you like. Plain scones are very nice with some jam, some butter, or even some cream if you're going to really treat yourself. So if you can see now, I've started to do the rubbing in method, and what I'm doing as well, if you can see, I'll try and do it quite slowly for the camera, is I'm raising it up out of the bowl. So as I raise it up out of the bowl, I'm also aerating it, so that means I'm getting air into it. And what that air is going to do is going to give me a nice light texture when my scones are cooked. So I'm just aerating it like that to give me hopefully a lovely light texture. So you can see there, if I show you, that I've still got some quite big lumps. So if I shake my bowl like that, the big lumps will come to the top. So I'm just going to continue rubbing it in until it all looks like fine breadcrumbs. So try and get hold of those bigger pieces and just rub them through your fingertips like that. So another minute or so and I think I'll be there. And then what I'm going to do is add my other ingredients. So the alternative to using fruit is to make them savoury, and they are really nice savoury ones. So if you're making them savoury, then it's likely you're going to use some cheese and a little bit of salt, a pinch of salt, and you could use 50 grams of cheese instead of the fruit. Also you can put in other things, so olives are particularly nice if you like olives, or sun-dried tomatoes, anything like that really. You can be adventurous and you can try things out and see what works for you and what you like. Okay, so I'm more or less there, just a couple of bigger lumps that I need to distribute and get rid of. So one more shake, see if I have any big lumps, and then that'll be it. Okay, so you can see now, hopefully, if I just show you, you can see that it's looking much more like fine breadcrumbs. So here now I have got 75 grams of sultanas, so I'm going to pop those in, but actually I'm not going to put quite all of those in. If you get too many in, then what tends to happen is if they come to the outside of the dough, they can burn a little bit. So I'm not going to overdo it. I'll probably put about 50 grams in. And then I've also got here some sugar, okay, and I'm going to pop that in as well. So I've got 2 tablespoons of sugar. So I'm going to mix that round. And then the next thing is I need to make this into a soft dough. So the way to do that is I'm going to add some milk. Now in here I have got about 100 millilitres of milk, but I'm not going to add it all at once. So I'm going to add about half of it to start with. And then once I've put that in, I'm going to mix it round using a table knife. So I'm mixing it round the outside and then pulling it down the middle. So I'm mixing it round and pulling it down and trying to pull the dough together. Okay, mix it round, pull it down the middle. I'm then going to pour in a little bit more, but not too much. I don't want to pour in all the milk at once, because if my mixture gets too sticky or too soft, sorry, I will find it too hard to form my scone shapes. So just do it a little bit at a time. You might need all the milk, or you might find you don't need all the milk, which is why we do it a little bit at a time, because it's not an exact science, okay? So just do it like that. You can see now that it's coming together in quite large lumps. I think I need just a tiny bit more. Got a little bit of dry ingredients there. Still got some milk left. So I'm pulling it together, pulling it down the middle of the bowl, and then I'm going to get my hand and just pull that dough into a ball. And you can see that I'm just kind of wiping it around the bowl so the bowl is left nice and clean. Okay, so I'm going to get that out onto the table. Using a flour dredger, I can put a bit of flour on the table. If you don't have a flour dredger, then just use a bit of flour out of the packet. A little bit of flour on the top. And then using the palm of my hand, I'm just going to tap it down. You don't need a rolling pin, just use your hand to about 2 centimetres in height. Don't do it any flatter than that. Okay, so if I can show you there, that's the depth that you want. No flatter, because otherwise they will end up like biscuits and not scones. And then just using a cutter, I'm going to press it hard and I'm going to cut them out. Okay, and pop them onto my baking tray. So if you don't have a cutter at home, again, don't worry too much about it. If you don't have a cutter, then you can just shape them with your hand. Okay, so you could just take a small ball like that, roll it around in your hand like that, squash it together, and then just flatten it down and just shape it by hand. So if I put the baking tray so you can see, so I've got the ones that I've cut out, but then I've got the one I've shaped by hand, which is absolutely fine. So don't worry if you don't have everything to hand. So then I've got 5 scones out of that mix. Obviously you can make them smaller if you wish. It just depends on the size of the cutter or the size that you make them. And then also what you can do is you can glaze the top. So you can use a milk glaze or an egg glaze if you want to put a little bit of shine onto the top, so they'll become a bit shiny. and then I'm going to put those into the oven. So I've got them in a hot oven, so they cook quite quickly. So my oven is on at 220 degrees C or gas mark 8, and I am going to put them into that oven for about 10 to 15. Okay, so before they go into the oven, I'm just going to use the excess milk that I've got left using a pastry brush. But again, if you don't have it, you could just use a little spoon, put a little bit of milk onto the top of each one, a little bit onto that one, and then I'm going to use my oven gloves, and these are going to go into the oven, as I say, 220 degrees or gas mark 8 for about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so we'll come back to them in a few minutes when we have cooked them, and we'll have a look at them and see what they look like. Right, thank you. Okay everyone, so you can see that I've got the scones out of the oven here, and if you look at them, they are nice and golden brown, and I can just hold one up there. You can see they're brown underneath as well. If you remember, we've talked about dextrinization, and dextrinization is that scientific term when we get this nice golden colour when the starch has reacted with the heat. So you can see that on those scones there. The other thing, if you remember when I talked to you about putting the amount of fruit in, if the fruit comes to the outsides like it has here, it can sometimes burn a little bit. So that is why we need to try and not go overboard with the fruit, because otherwise we can end up with things that scones that are a little bit too much on the burnt side. So just make sure you don't think, oh, I'll add lots and lots in, because it can sometimes actually spoil them. So that's it. So hopefully you will get a chance to have a go at making some for yourself. If you can't do that because you don't have the ingredients, then that's not a problem. But if you want to have a go and send me the results of what you've done, then that would be absolutely lovely. Okay, thank you very much for listening.